I've said, and I tweeted probably a couple weeks ago, that I think the Shohei Ohtani story is the most undercovered in all of sports right now. 33 home runs for Ohtani at the All-Star break. He is pitching at a very high level. Right now, he is Babe Ruth. I mean, if you go look at the statistics that Babe Ruth brought to bear when he was a pitcher and he was a hitter, Shohei Ohtani right now is performing at a Babe Ruth-like level, the likes of which, frankly, no one of my generation or no one around my age has ever seen before. He's favored to win the Major League Baseball Home Run Derby, and he will be the starting pitcher in the All-Star game this week. So Stephen A. Smith on First Take went on and talked about Shohei Ohtani, and he said, and this is what all of the flashpoint is for, I don't think it helps that the number one face, talking about Major League Baseball, is a dude that needs an interpreter so you can understand what the hell he's saying in this country. This is Stephen A. Smith. Now, the pitchforks are out now for Stephen A. Smith. Let me just say right off the top, I'm not a cancel culture guy, right? I don't believe that cancel culture should exist. But I think one reason people are reacting to Stephen A. is because ESPN has pretty clearly made it transparent that you can be racist, and I'm not saying this is racist, but you can be racist, like Jalen Rose calling Kevin Love a token white basketball player and saying the only reason he was on the team was because he was white, and the NBA was afraid of having an all-black team, even though they had an all-black team in 2000, 2008, 2004, and 2016, was a racist statement. Nothing happened to Jalen Rose because the standard of speech at ESPN for a black guy is different than the standard of speech would be for a white guy. And so Stephen A. Smith says what he did, and again, I'll give you the quote. And so I am not in favor, I want to be transparent, clear with all of you, I'm not in favor of any sort of cancel culture here. But Stephen A. Smith talking about Shohei Ohtani, I don't think it helps that the number one face is a dude that needs an interpreter so you can understand what the hell he's saying in this country. And you can go watch the video and see it for yourself. Now, the larger context of the conversation was about Major League Baseball and branding. And certainly this has been a major conversation for a long time because Mike Trout, who is a teammate of Shohei Ohtani on the LA Angels, is the best player in baseball and has been for the past several years, but he's not a very loud, marketable guy. And so Major League Baseball, he hasn't really drawn that much attention outside of his unique talents. Now, the question that Stephen A. is asking, if in a larger debate, is an intriguing one if you give him the benefit of the doubt here, because the larger context is, to what extent does marketability in America rely on an athlete being American? And I don't know the answer to that right now. I'm sure there is data to tell you, hey, LeBron James is a valuable asset in the NBA from a marketability perspective. What is the difference if LeBron James had the exact same talent but was instead a foreign-born player? Or think about it this way, the NBA, which now has a lot of international players, how much more value in the United States itself would Giannis or Luka have if they were American-born players? In other words, does that matter? Is it still a significant factor? Or is in this day and age where you're from less significant? Let me give you an example. When I was a kid growing up, there were very few international stars who played sports. Nowadays, FIFA soccer, for instance, is so popular that Ronaldo and Messi are wildly popular in the United States, even though they don't even play a sport in the United States, right? This is an interesting question. Or if you think about it, when I was a kid, the only real athletes I remember that were international and had any sort of appeal in the United States, by and large, were like the Boris Beckers, the Yvonne Lindels, if you cared about them, Stefan Edberg. If you watch tennis, and I loved to watch tennis back in the day, international tennis stars. Soccer wasn't big enough for people to care about, at least where I grew up. And so tennis was one. And then there were a few foreign NBA players when I was a kid, but not really that many. Most of American sports were populated by American sports stars. Vlade Divac, for instance, would have been a guy early on that would have had a lot of interest. Drazen Petrovic. There were relatively few foreign players playing in America. If that were the conversation, it would be a conversation that you could have. The way that Stephen A. Smith conveyed this, I don't know enough, frankly, about Shohei Ohtani to know how well he does or does not speak English. But the way that this came off is going to be messy for Stephen A. and for ESPN because of their inconsistent speech standards and their consistency of going out and suspending or firing people based on what they say not fitting the appropriate speech standards. In Major League Baseball, for instance, Curt Schilling got fired, right? And so what is the standard for speech at ESPN? They've also punished Rachel Nichols because of something that she didn't even say on the air. And I also think there should be, in my opinion, a difference between what's said on the air and what is said in your private life, because ESPN is distributing what's said on air, but if you're talking in your private life, to me, that's a different standard. My standard, in general, is I'm opposed to cancel culture. I don't think we gain anything by sitting around and waiting for someone to say something that you decide is unacceptable. And I mean you, like the public, social media. Usually it's left-wingers who decide what is and what is not appropriate to be said in our culture today. And I don't think we gain very much by saying, oh, there has to be consequences for this opinion or that opinion. And those consequences are suspensions or firings or whatever they are. I don't think that's a healthy place for our country to be. In fact, if you regularly listen to this show, you would know that my two biggest twin pillars upon which I fight against is I think identity politics and cancel culture, and the combination of the two is the biggest threat to American life today. That's what I believe. Other people disagree, but I think the idea that your immutable identity, something that is a characteristic that you don't choose, your race, your gender, you don't choose those things at birth. The fact that those define you in any way, to me, represents a threat because it slices and dices us all up based on what we look as opposed to what we think, okay? It's cosmetic in nature. And I also think cancel culture. So to my knowledge, I have never said this person has to be fired for saying this thing. But what I will say is I do think the standards have to be evenly applied. And this is where people get upset at me, a lot of people. I believe that whether you're white, black, Asian, Hispanic, gay, straight, male, female, whatever your identity is, I think we need to apply the same standard of speech no matter what. And right now we don't. Because, and I used Jalen Rose as an example a couple weeks ago, because when Jalen Rose came out and called Kevin Love a token, if a white hockey analyst, and I don't even know if this is true, if a black hockey player had made the U.S. hockey team, and someone came out and said, well, that black guy made it as a token because they didn't want to have an all-white hockey team, that analyst would get fired and probably never work in sports again. And the same thing is true of other sport analysts, right? I don't know, the swimming team. If you said, hey, the only reason that person of that race is on the team is because they're a token, and you were a white person, you would get fired, right? This is pretty clear. And so why do we have different standards of speech based on the race or the gender of the speaker? That's where I'm calling for consistency. And by the way, I want a lenient consistency, right? You don't have to agree with everything that you hear on television. You don't have to agree with everything that you hear on radio. And as a firm believer in the marketplace of ideas, I believe when you constrain what can and cannot be said in terms of a debate and you label everything racist or sexist or homophobic or whatever the classification might be, you are not helping in any way our national discourse from a First Amendment perspective. So, Stephen A. under fire, and I'm curious to see how exactly this is going to play out, but I'll always defend anybody just about in the world of speech because I don't like the idea of identity politics or cancel culture determining what can and cannot be said in this country, and I don't like the idea of policing everything. Now, I think Shohei Ohtani is an incredible story for Major League Baseball. And the end result of the controversy here, probably, for some people, is going to actually put Shohei Ohtani in front of them in a way that he was not before. Because people are going to say, well, what's this story? Why is he so compelling in Major League Baseball? And I hope he goes out tonight and puts on a whale of a show at the Home Run Derby. He's the favorite to win it all. We'll be debating that on Fox Bet Live here coming up in just a moment.